We all listen to a lot of podcasts and read a lot. So reading and listening are both receptive skills. And then writing and speaking are productive skills. And I think when you write about something or if you speak about it, it requires a lot more effort and it requires a lot more precision, of course, because you're the person putting out this information and you're trying to organize the ideas into words. So I find that really helps to consolidate what I had, in air quotes, learned before. Here's to the ones that we got. Cheers to the wish you were here, but you're not. Can the dreams bring back all the memories of everything we've been through? The drinks bring back all of the memories. So we're going to be talking about memory today. We actually forgot that this was the topic, ironically. Which is why we need a few more techniques for memory.
Right. It's never too late to start, I guess. Yeah, maybe I can start with this one.
Yes, please, Sal.
Yeah, when you think about life, what's the most important thing for you in life? If you ask people, it's always something different. It can be money, it can be whatever. You can make something up. But without memory, what is the worth of any of the things that you have, right? So I got interested in the topic of memory myself because I'm the perfect specimen for having a very bad memory to test different techniques and see if I can actually improve them. And so I was looking for ways to retain memory better, quicker, for longer. Because, I noticed I'm reading books and then years later, I don't even remember the title sometimes. So there's different techniques that I found that are very helpful, and certain techniques I rediscovered that I used during study times, let's say at university, but then maybe life got in the way and I forgot about them. Other techniques, they are very good to keep your brain active. They are very good to deepen memories. So yeah, these techniques have been used in ancient times. So if you look at the old philosophers, it's very interesting that they had to hold their whole oratories, their whole speeches without any teleprompter, yes, many politicians do these days. So they had to stand there for hours and hours and hours. And so they, in fact, at a young age, they were taught the skills of rhetoric and also the skills of several memory techniques, amongst them the method of Loci. And today it's better known.
Can you spell that?
Loci?
L-O-C-I?
L-O-C-I. I guess in Italy we say Loci, probably in English it's Loci, I have no idea. But so today it's better known as the Mind Palace. And that's one of the several techniques I've been trying and that I am trying, and I'm not saying that I'm good at it, but this is something I'm trying at the moment. And so the idea is basically that you connect a memory or a thought or a visualization to a certain rooms or places, because the spatial memory that we have actually is much better to retain and reactivate information once it's in our brain. So if I would read you a list of things or places, names, whatever, probably you would not remember one word that I said after 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 2 days, whatever. However, if you would visualize those names or words within a room of your choice, let's say the room you're sitting in right now. If you are watching this video and you're sitting in a room, or you're listening to this podcast and you're sitting somewhere or walking, I hope you're not doing anything dangerous at the moment. And you place those things I'm mentioning. Let's say an iPad, an apple, and a monkey, okay? If you would have to recall these three things in a few hours, you would probably not remember most of them. But if you think about an iPad in your hands while you're watching this video, an apple you're eating in this moment, or an apple that's sitting across you on a desk, and a monkey dancing next to you trying to get that apple or something like that, then for sure you would remember this memory, or the chance would increase by quite a lot. So this is one very simple technique, and this is not even the right way it's applied. Now, you maybe have heard of these memory competitions. Okay, these are these crazy savants who they read within a very short time. They read and study hundreds of cards, decks of cards, and the order in which the cards are lying. They memorize them, and they are capable of recalling the exact order of those cards, or phone numbers, hundreds of phone numbers, thousands of phone numbers, whatever it is. All these crazy memory feats. But what they use is they don't have a particularly good memory, but they're using memory techniques. Amongst them, the method of Loki. There are also other memory techniques that are very interesting and that are good to combine with the method of Loki. So, for example, there are mnemonic systems where you basically teach yourself, and this takes routine and exercise, but you teach yourself basically to decode numbers and connect them to what do you call them? Vocals? No, what do you call it when you just pronounce instead of a K you say just K? It's a
phoneme.
Yes, exactly. Phonetics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. This is a very good example that I don't have a very good memory. Otherwise, I would have remembered that. But then, to be fair, I have not written down one. I haven't prepared at all for this episode. This is all out of memory.
Freestyle.
Exactly, I like it. And so once you learn these sets of phonetics, and you can combine them, associate them with numbers, the next step would be then to create imagery based on those phonetics. So P and L, P, for example, could be an apple, right? And so you would basically first codify numbers into phonetics, then codify phonetics into images. And then, of course, once you did that, it sounds like a lot of work to go through for memorizing stuff, but it's really worth it, and it's not that many phonetics actually that you have to learn. And it's something that you do once, and then you have this set of images, let's say, that you have access to. And then you can basically connect them to numbers, for example. If you had, for example, a phone number you have to remember, 001155, just as an example, that would be codified into some phonetics. Now, just making something up, this could be PP, FF, AC, whatever. And you would have three sets of phonetics that would correspond to three different images that you already had learned before in your data set, let's say. And now you can just use those three images, place them somewhere into your room, into your mind palace, in a certain order, and then you just recall those three objects in that order and decodify it back into the phone number that you try to remember. And this sounds like a whole lot of work, I know, but when you have to remember a really long number, this is really useful.
Mm-hmm.
And you can use it for these kind of things. Anyway, but that's kind of the things I'm looking into right now and trying to learn. But what about yourselves? Hang
on, Sal. Before you throw us the frisbee, could you tell us a bit more about your own mind palace? Because when we were on a run one morning, you were talking me through it a little bit and telling me how that you created these underground rooms, and different rooms had different places, and what you're using it for specifically.
Yes, well, I have different uses for different mind palaces. Let's say I have created. It sounds a bit weird, but I have created basically a fantasy world in my head. And, well, don't we all have a fantasy world in our heads? But what I mean is that I've created physical locations that I try to remember, and when I can, every night before I go to sleep and maybe do some meditation, I also try to incorporate, basically walking through this world I created so that I don't forget about it. And one exact use case that I can give you as an example is when while learning a programming language called Swift, which is used for iOS development for the iPhone or iPads or iOS devices in general. This was very useful to compartmentalize different categories into different rooms or sections of the room in my mind palace. And that allowed me to quickly, first when I was learning the language itself, to go into certain rooms. And for example, when there's the topic of arrays. Arrays is a topic in programming languages, which is nothing unique to Swift. But there's a room in my mind palace where Ray Charles is playing something on a piano. And so anything that I learned concerning arrays in Swift, the first image that I have to recall all that information is Ray Charles saying hi to me. And then in that room behind him is all the stuff that I need to know to recall arrays. Because it's array playing, So you can make these little connections. And it's really working for me because when I just did it the other day, I went back to my mind palace in that room where I had different categories of the Swift language. And I could recall things quite easily. Sometimes it took me a while to remember what object was there. And in fact, the more outrageous or the more visual, the more emotional the object is that you associate with what you want to recall, the easier it will be to recall it. So if you're using borderline sexual or whatever stuff, it always works to recall stuff very easily.
Really?
I don't know. I suppose, because if that's something you're into, whatever you're into, if you're into goldfish, then maybe you want to incorporate more goldfish into your visualizations. I don't know. So, and that's just a room with different sections, let's say, which is part of a bigger complex, of course, because that room is located on a staircase which goes down into the basement but it's a huge staircase, like one of those castles, so you can have endless stairs going down, 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 down. And every level basically brings you deeper into the topic, in my case, the Swift programming language. But then I have another room into a completely different part of this palace. And it's literally a palace, which resembles a bit some old Roman huge palaces with columns and huge, archways and whatever. And different room is for machine learning, which is another topic which I find interesting and complex, but it helps me really to put things into proportion and recall them. And then there's a whole different area in a different part of this complex, which for me is a complex of islands, and each island holds its certain palaces, and they're connected with either by boat or different other means with which I travel from one part of the island to the other parts. Some are for sports.
Did you get these memory islands from Inside Out, the film? That's the image I've got in my mind.
No, but I'm sure it's a mix of video games I played in the past and I just made them up. So that's the cool thing about mind palaces. You can literally make them up yourself. And so that's and also I try to, while I walk through these rooms, when I try to recall things or save, let's say, deposit new information, I always try to walk the whole walk and to recall other things that are maybe unrelated, but also try to imagine smells, sounds, maybe of things that happened in similar circumstances, not in a mind palace situation, but maybe on the beach, whatever. And try to make it really a full sensory experience. And that's how I use mind palaces. Might not be for everyone. And I do not know also, how much of it is me every night almost trying to repeat the stuff. Maybe it's just spaced repetition. Maybe it's a mix of these things.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't say if it's a placebo effect and it helps me. I don't know. There are many better techniques, I guess, to retain memory. Which one is writing down things on paper?
I don't know, though. Because when you were telling us about walking through these rooms, is exactly the technique that I'd heard about when I watched a short video by a memory world champion. Mm-hmm. And in her competition, they have to remember a list of numbers, right? And she was describing how she would walk down a street that she knows. In her mind, she'd walk down a street that she knows, and she'd put one number here, and then she'd put one number here, then she'd walk into the house, and there'd be one number that had morphed into like the Cookie Monster, and it'd be on the table. And then, so it was exactly as you said, it was very, very visual and very experiential. And it's interesting that you said the crazier or the more striking,
outrageous.
Yeah, the more outrageous image that you can create, the better, because that sort of ties into a very general concept, which is that we remember things better when it's attached to an emotion, to a strong emotion. So it could be extreme fear, it could be laughter, it could be fun. But of course, you're going to remember whatever you want to remember, a number, a word, right, whatever information it is, if you attach it to an emotion. And if you can't do that naturally, then of course you have to do it in a technique like a mind palace.
Exactly. I mean, that's the cool thing, that you can really control what actually becomes memorized, because it's an unconscious process. It's like breathing, and in a way similar to breathing, it's also one of those things that we seem to have forgotten about. There used to be some ancient knowledge about, and we talked about breathing in a past episode of the podcast. And it's one of those things that people knew back then, and now science starts to rediscover the benefits of it. Now, I do not know much about. I'm not sure that I can say that the science behind mind palaces really. I don't think there's really proof of longevity for creating lasting memory with mind palaces. But it certainly is a tool in a toolbox that can be useful to some. I mean, it's even in the English language, and you two are Brits, if I recall correctly, in the first place. It's a way of saying, but that's literally, it means in the first place of your mind palace. That's where it comes from, because that's where you started your thought.
In the first place?
In the first place.
In the first place.
Mm-hmm.
The physical location.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yes. So yeah, but I'm interested to, if you guys ever experimented with mind memorization techniques, or if you just naturally use certain techniques to recall. I know that James, you're writing your blog posts, and you're writing a lot. Then I don't know what your if you ever got into the topic or.
No. I don't think I do for memory really. I was just trying to think whether there'd any your examples there were good of your software that you like where you'd use it in practically in life, these kind of memorization techniques. But I can't think in where. I don't know. I think my thing's sort of the same every day. It's less to do with the mind, isn't it? My work's more physical, so I can't think. But is there anywhere you use these techniques, James? Like you say, your writing probably helps you. Is a way of kind of going through your ideas and maybe reinforcing them or knowing what to drop out or whatever.
It's a good question, John. Yeah, I suppose I would split things into receptive and productive, because we all listen to a lot of podcasts and read a lot. So reading and listening are both receptive skills. And then writing and speaking are productive skills. And I think when you write about something, or if you speak about it, it requires a lot more effort, and it requires a lot more precision, of course, because you're the person who's putting out this information, and you're trying to organize the ideas into words. So I find that really helps to consolidate what I had, in air quotes, learned before, or at least come across before, passively through listening and reading. When I was studying at university, particularly, and at college and school, and when we had a test that we needed to remember facts for, I would make each fact that I needed to remember into I'm not sure if it's a mnemonic, but each one would be a letter, and then the letters would make words. And so for a block of information, I would remember like a short sentence or a list of 3 words, and then each letter would take me to a more detailed piece of information. Would that be a mnemonic, Sal? Is it slightly different?
I think there's different ways. There's no real one rule. Actually, there's literally dozens of rules of how mnemonic is being applied. So whatever works for you basically is good.
That worked quite well for me, because I just remember sort of odd words here and there. And the D was for this piece of information. And then it was sort of like, in a way, analogous to your mind palace, in that if I took the letter D from this word, suddenly it would open up in front of me. and the information would be stored in a very small bit. But once you take it out and press play, as it were, in your mind, then there's a lot more information stored in it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just trying to make things more efficient. But in terms of, because I always think about this, because obviously I teach English. How can you use these techniques for learning, or not learning, remembering vocabulary? And you can use all of these techniques to remember vocabulary, because you can do it in the sort of the heavy lifting way, right? Which is repetition, repetition, repetition. Again, if you have an emotion attached to it, then it's even better, because you're more likely to remember it later, because you'll recall the experience, and then the experience will carry with it the information that you want. But for example, if you're reading a word, if you're reading extensively a book, a novel, a blog post, whatever it is, you need between 8 and 10 exposures to a word for it to be then part of your vocabulary, as it were. So that is not a very efficient way.
That would be like the spaced repetition thing that Duolingo does do. Like it shows your word more often in the beginning and then a bit less. But
that's it.
Slow but sure, it goes into your
Interestingly, with listening, it's more than 15 exposures. So for reading, it's 8 to 10, and then for listening, it's over 15 exposures for vocabulary to be stored. So, I mean, these are not efficient ways to do it. So the mind palace, the mnemonics, attaching some sort of emotional experience to the information is much more efficient in the long term.
Yeah, would love if there would be maybe we can find some scientific studies or something, but I don't think there's that much available about mind palaces. Would be interesting to see though if somebody started a project to study the effect of mind palaces on memory. I'm not sure how it would work indeed with vocabulary, because I'm not sure if it's better maybe to capture big contexts rather than single words. But yeah, it would be interesting to see how it can improve, because it seems to be very expensive to kind of store single words, because vocabulary consists of thousands of words, You
need context always, because without context, things don't have any meaning, do they?
Sure.
So when you're learning a language, for example, don't start reading word lists, because they have no context, they have no meaning, they have no emotional attachment. So it's not a useful way to get learning vocabulary, for example. Yeah.
Okay.
We've hit the mark.
Yes, 22, gentlemen.
Interesting stuff, Sal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for listening. It's always good to keep the mind busy, whether you have a perfect mind or if you have a bit of a scattered mind and are distracted easily, that's okay. I guess as long as you are curious and try to train your mind, that's always good.
Then should we finish with a song?
Which one? Earth, Wind and Fire? Do you remember?
September.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening or watching this episode of the Three-Headed Hydra Podcast.
Wow.
Stay tuned for the next episode. Take care. Subscribe. Bye.